Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Play Dark Souls. I've maybe kind of been putting this episode off a little bit because this is one of the more challenging sections of the game, and it ends with probably one of the most challenging bosses in it. But let's go exploring, you know? The first thing that we get in here is the Silver Knight type enemy that we only saw as those awful archers on the bridge, and for some reason this one has like a super short aggro range. I don't know exactly what the deal with that is. Like seriously, hello? Hello? I always remembered this about this part of the game. Oh, you're here. Hello. So, these are the Silver Knights. I didn't get to talk about them too much during the last episode because we were kind of at that part of the game, but I did mention they bear some striking similarities to the Black Knights that we've been able to see, and there's a reason for that, but I believe it'll have to wait until we get their armor or possibly some of their weapons to really learn a bit about them, so we'll put that on hold. Anyway, so, like I said, kind of at the start of the last, or the end of the last episode, this part of the game here, or this part of, like, on Orlando here is really a lot more run down than the parts that you'd be able to see. And I really like that kind of design where, like, we have this dusty floor here where you wouldn't really expect humans to ever show up. At least as far as this. It kind of, like, drives home that this idea that Orlando is really the city that you're supposed to see certain parts of, and really that it's being preserved almost unnaturally, if that makes sense. But another thing that I really like about the overall design here is that I have no idea what that noise is. Anyway, another thing I really like about the design here is that you go from this big grand city and, like, you know, walking on awnings and things like this. If we go to this door, it doesn't open. Into a much tinier room that allows them to set up this whole gauntlet idea a lot better, because the rest of this level is basically exploring this mansion. Over here, we end up in what seems to be a sort of storage room for, whatever that texture is supposed to be. Is it a bone? Is it a map? I don't know. And mostly, you know, doesn't look like there's too much here. However, if you walk over this way, you will notice that there is a window cut out here with a room and stairs behind it. And what looks like a door right over to where that fireplace is. You'll also notice that in one of the other rooms there was like a thing blocking the fireplace where this is just wide open. So I quite like that. Let's see what we find down here. It is really quite a dark area. In Dark Souls 1 there isn't like a torch mechanic outside of the lamp that we could potentially equip here, but I know it's down here, so I won't. But I kind of like the way that the player has a light aura around them. It really lets them set up these kind of situations where, like, you can see everything around you and react to combat, but you can't really, you know, you can just barely make out things in the distance until you get close to them. It gives the game a very claustrophobic feel without making combat feel unfair. So, we see another chest and two other chests, and as you might have noticed, the chains are different from these two to this one. If we open up these, we find Havel's Great Shield and the Dragon Tooth. These are Havel's weapons. I'm surprised that... Okay, then. Sometimes the buttons get a little bit overwritten here. But basically, this is Havel's gear. And by implication, this is Havel's mansion, or at least Havel's place in this mansion. Clearly, the level associates this place with Havel. And before we go further, let's read up on some of these things, just so that I don't forget. Let's see. There we go. Dragon Tooth. Created from an everlasting dragon tooth, legendary great hammer of Havel the Rock. The dragon tooth will never break as it is harder than stone, and grants its wielder resistance to magic and flame. And, as you can see from the item durability, the second to last number there, it is ridiculously high. That might actually be set to infinite and only, like, show up as 999. I don't actually know if you can break it. And while there's no way that we could possibly equip this thing, I just want to show how completely ridiculous it is, and how it really just shows you, through weapons that you, the player, can equip, how big and larger than life Havel is. The swing is really good, too. Oh, hey, we actually have the strength for this, and to wield it two-handed. So this is the actual moveset of the weapon, but only when you two-hand it. And then we also got his Great Shield, which I will go as soon as I remember. Yeah, this. I don't actually know how many of these have different descriptions, but I know this one definitely will. Great Shield of the legendary Havel the Rock, cut straight from a great slab of stone. This Great Shield is imbued with the magic of Havel, provides strong defense, and is incredibly heavy. A true divine heirloom, on par with the Dragon Tooth. And it is one of the best PvP items if you want to make just a huge heavy dude who will never take any sort of hits, any guff. Armor worn by Havel the Rock's warriors. Carved from solid rock, its tremendous weight is matched only by the defense it provides. Havel's warriors never flinched nor retreated from battle. Those unfortunate enough to face them were inevitably beaten to a pulp. And I really like that you get this description after you have most likely ended up already fighting Havel. It sort of, like, reinforces this idea of how great Havel is, because he's one of the ridiculously strong, kill-you-in-one-hit enemies. Yeah, that's what I thought. I think most of these actually have the same description now. But, like, you get a practical taste of just how strong Havel and his troops are before the game tells you about it. You learn about it through gameplay, and when you find this, the whole idea is really reinforced, and it works really well. But of course, Havel's gear and armor are one thing. What would he hide in a mimic, exactly? Let's find out. Oh dear. Ooh. Yeah, watch the hell out for that spin kick. It is ridiculously powerful. Like, most of the Mimic's attacks are extremely powerful. Like, do a ton of damage, do a ton of stamina. So in here, we find an occult club. Now, this is just a club imbued with the dark element, the same way that we have a divine Morningstar. Occult club is the same thing. I think it actually, it doesn't change the description at all. But the thing about occult weapons is that they do bonus damage to creatures of the gods. They will hurt Silver Knights a lot. They will hurt all sorts of enemy types with a lot of bonus damage. And it's really interesting that Havel the Rock, one of Gwyn's closest confidants, would have something like this. It kind of... The game never really goes into more about this, but it just... There's so much implied storytelling just by putting what is essentially a generic weapon with a generic power-up next to this armor related to this NPC. And it's just a really fantastic form of storytelling that you could only get out of video games like this. Also worth noting, the geography or like the architecture of this place is really fucking interesting. Like, the main set piece of this house is this giant double helix spiral staircase that you can't get from one to the other on. And it forces you, like, if we call what we were on the first floor before, we are now on the third floor of this place. There's a whole nother level that we actually can see here but can't get to. And I really like that setup. We also walk into this room and come face to face with, like, a giant creepy Drake face here. And it can be quite a, like, shock to see it the first time, but you very quickly realize that this is actually a trophy room for someone who must have been a dragon hunter of sorts. So you get I really like the design of this room because it's mostly incidental. You can see that there is actually a Silver Knight and some chests down there, but it's decorated to make it so interesting and to just tell you so many little things. Over on this side, we see another Silver Knight. Hello. The ones with the spears aren't generally all that bad. They can only attack in front of them, and I've always found them fairly easy to backstab. So that's quite nice. Of course, along with the sense of death and decay, we get another taste of something quite like that, given that there is a Titanite demon in what looks like a ruined chapel of sorts in here too. The Gwyn and the demons have an extremely bad past that we'll end up probably coming to once we get down to Izalith, or the demon and the demon ruins. But for this to be here makes absolutely no sense except for it being something that was either imprisoned or that is snuck in here under whatever a watchful eye has been trying to keep this place in order, essentially. That's another weird chain, because it is another mimic. Woo! These things have such, like, I'd call them wacky animations, but they're really freaky. Like, it's so incongruous with the rest of the game that it just makes for such a wonderfully gross feel to these things. You know, they're grotesquely human. We get some silver coins out of that one, which isn't too much. We could feed those to Frammed. And then, yeah, this is actually also a mimic, isn't it? Boop. Dark Souls 2 actually put in a mechanic where chests could fall apart if you could attack them, because it knew that you would know the mimics existed, and there was no cost to just going and attacking a chest. There still kind of isn't, because if you attack it the first time, it isn't, you know, too much of a problem, but it's... I kind of like to think about a lot of the decisions that were made in Dark Souls 2 based on the fact that the player base had played Dark Souls 1. It makes it a very different feeling game overall. Pop this, get a gold coin. That's nice. I don't know if there are any other mimics in the area now that I think about it. And then you'll also notice that I was pointedly avoiding this hallway, and the reason for that is that there is actually a Silver Knight at the other end of it here. He will also quite happily sit there and shoot arrows at you for as long as possible, so you really have to, like, bait him out into fighting you in the hallway. Like, if I were to back up too far here, he would actually just pull his bow and arrow back out and go back to shooting me. Like, you really do need to force him into fighting you here. He is almost dead. He's also getting very defensive with me. There we go. Enemies in this game are a lot less reactive than they are in the later ones as well. Like, you can cheese a lot of those types of enemies by doing the circle strafe around them and start winding up with a big weapon. just because it works. I believe this door is also locked, and given that every other door has led to a balcony with nothing else on it, this is the only way forward. And over here, we actually come into quite an ornate room. So, and this is the fireplace blocker that I was talking about that was absent from the basement with Havel's gear. But it really makes this whole house into something difficult to place, because on one hand, it has that trophy room. On the other hand, it has a lot of quite bare rooms, but then this is incredibly ornate. There is a lot of attention to detail given in here, and there's a lot of very Renaissance-y, classical-looking pictures and portraits here, including this one of, I don't know, big lady. So I do quite like it, and especially that, you know, out of all of this, this room is in nearly perfect order, but some chairs are kind of pushed out of the way. The decay is not total. Someone has clearly put this place together. But at the same time, you can see just those little tiny signs of neglect. Also, you walk in here and, hello there. This can be quite a mean trap for you the first time. Of course, when you see these Silver Knights walk around, you can kind of tell how things were, like, knocked over. They destroy pots, they destroy things all over. There's sort of an implication with the Silver Knights that they're not quite alive in the same way. Like, it's never really explained if they've hollowed or if they're something else entirely, but they definitely don't seem to be human. They may just be more guardians of things, and you could totally understand how something that is essentially an automaton would knock over chairs or, you know, disrupt the order that this place is clearly looking for. This is another fairly difficult encounter here, because if you try to rush that guy, yeah, this guy aggroes pretty much no matter what you do. So I'm going to attempt to deal with him before the guy with the arrow, with the bow and arrow over there notices me, because that will make this fight significantly more complicated. Ooh, he got a good shot on me, so it's a good thing I backstabbed. Because without that, I would have been a little bit screwed. There we go. We pretty much handled that correctly, though. And yeah, this guy was not fast enough to take his sword out, so we do end up on the roof of this building and get what is essentially one last view of this beautiful area, at least for this part. You have these lovely flying buttresses in the corner. We have the wall that we came from, so you get another, like, look how far you've come kind of moment here. You'll notice we came out of that door first, basically facing the literal area that we started here on. And over here you get, like, a very nice view that never really comes up until, let's say, a lot later in the series. But that's for another time. It's quite nice, though. The overall design of this city that you never go to is just really, really fantastic. It gives this whole city this view of this sense of grandeur, that there's parts of it that you're never even gonna see.